You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Feel like who art Ed?
Try to slice it.
Who art is Mr. Wood art Ed me?
Good. Either way, it's ambiguous. It works on so many levels.
I know.
That's off to a great start.
Welcome to Who Arted Weekly Art History for All Ages. I'm your host, Kyle Wood. Now, before I get into the episode, I want to let you know about my annual Arts Madness tournament. It's going to be coming up again in a bit. As many of you already know, every year I run daily mini episodes in the 64 days from the end of December until the tournament starts in March. I thought it might be fun to put some fan favorites into this year's tournament. I'll include about a dozen new artists and artworks I haven't previously covered. If you want to suggest a favorite artist or artwork, head on over to whoartedpodcast.com/vote or click the link in the show notes. Now on to the actual topic for today, Domenico Ghirlandaio. While names like Leonardo and Michelangelo often steal the spotlight, Ghirlandaio paved the way. He actually taught Michelangelo how to paint a fresco and made his own painting on the walls of the Sistine Chapel years before his protege covered the ceiling. Domenico Ghirlandaio was born Domenico di Tommaso di Corrado di Boffo Bigordi in Florence, Italy in 1449. He lived and worked entirely within the Quattrocento, the cultural and artistic explosion of the 1400s that defined the early Italian Renaissance. Ghirlandaio was the head of a massive and highly efficient family workshop that included his brothers and brother-in-law. This workshop system allowed him to dominate the Florentine art market, securing commissions from the wealthiest patrons of the era, including the Medici and Tornabuoni families. Unfortunately, he would pass away in just 1494 at the relatively young age of 45, succumbing to a fever, likely the plague, just as the High Renaissance was beginning to dawn. Ghirlandaio was best known as a fresco painter, although he was also a prolific creator of wooden panel paintings and portraits. His style often had a narrative clarity and technical precision, but he was really best known for capturing the realism of Florence in his day. Unlike some of its contemporaries who wanted to idealize their subjects into godlike perfection, Ghirlandaio grounded his religious scenes in the reality of the time. He frequently set biblical stories not in ancient Jerusalem, but in contemporary Florence, dressing his figures in the high fashion of the 1480s and placing them against backdrops of local architecture. Ghirlandaio is often viewed by art historians as a great chronicler of Florentine society. His frescoes serve as a visual document to the era, preserving the faces, hairstyles, clothing, and interiors of the wealthy merchant class. Now, here are 5 quick things to know about Domenico Ghirlandaio. Number 1. Ghirlandaio was the first master to teach Michelangelo. In 1488, a 13-year-old Michelangelo was apprenticed to Ghirlandaio's workshop. At this time, Ghirlandaio was working on a massive fresco cycle in the choir of Santa Maria Novella, one of the most prestigious commissions in Florence. It was here on the scaffolding alongside Domenico that Michelangelo learned the difficult technique of fresco painting directly onto wet plaster. While Michelangelo would later claim he was largely self-taught and downplayed his time in the workshop, historical records show that he spent at least a year under Ghirlandaio's tutelage. Scholars agree that the foundational skills Michelangelo used in later years to paint the Sistine Chapel ceiling, specifically his cross-hatching technique and understanding of fresco chemistry, were direct results of his training with Ghirlandaio. Number 2. His famous surname, Ghirlandaio, would literally translate to garland maker. Domenico's father, Tommaso, was a goldsmith renowned for creating intricate silver and gold garlands worn on the heads of young Florentine women. In the Italian workshop tradition, it was common for trade nicknames to stick to the family, and thus Domenico Bigordi became Domenico Ghirlandaio. And Actually, before he was a painter, he began his artistic training in his father's goldsmith shop. This early exposure to metalworking had a big impact on his artistic style. He painted clasps, metallic fringes, and jewelry with incredible precision that few other painters could match. Some say Ghirlandaio treated these accessories with as much care as the figures themselves. Number 3. Ghirlandaio famously inserted portraits of wealthy citizens into sacred religious scenes. Ghirlandaio was very creative in inserting donor portraits into his biblical narratives. While other artists might place a small kneeling donor in the corner of a painting, Ghirlandaio integrated them fully into the action. In his frescoes, you'll often see crowds of people witnessing the birth of Mary or the life of St. Francis. These onlookers weren't randomly created from his imagination or based on an artist's model. They were actually the bankers, politicians, and socialites of Florence. It was a status symbol for the patrons and a clever marketing tool for Ghirlandaio. For example, in the Sassetti Chapel, the patron, Francesco Sassetti, stands right next to the scene of a miracle, looking as important as the saints. Today, these inclusions provide historians with an accurate who's who of the late 15th century Florence, allowing us to identify key historical figures based solely on Ghirlandaio's realistic depictions. Number 4. Ghirlandaio worked on the Sistine Chapel before it was famous. When we think of the Sistine Chapel, let's face it, we think of Michelangelo. But a generation earlier, Pope Sixtus IV commissioned a team of all-stars to paint the walls of the chapel. In 1481, Ghirlandaio traveled to Rome alongside heavy hitters like Botticelli and Perugino to execute these frescoes. Ghirlandaio painted The Vocation of the Apostles, a monumental scene depicting Jesus calling Peter and Andrew to follow him. Not only did this work show that he could manage complex compositions with large groups of people and vast landscapes, by getting him out of Florence, he moved to a whole nother level. He wasn't just painting for the local aristocrats anymore. He was painting for the Pope himself. I mean, there was literally no higher authority on earth. And finally, number 5, Ghirlandaio was heavily influenced by Northern European art, specifically the realism of the Netherlands. In the 1480s, the Portinari altarpiece by the Flemish master Hugo van der Goes arrived in Florence. The massive oil painting shocked Italian artists with the brutal realism, the shepherds looking like dirty, weathered peasants rather than idealized figures. While many Italian artists rejected this style, Ghirlandaio embraced it. He began studying these northern works and started to incorporate that unflinching style and naturalistic detail into his own practice. He started painting shepherds with gaps in their teeth, wrinkles in their skin, and rough hands. And this blend of the sort of structured, elegant Italian art style with the grittier, more realistic northern art really defined his signature style. Now, today, I want to look at one of his famous paintings, the Adoration of the Shepherds. It's an altarpiece painted in 1485. It's tempera on panel sitting in the Sassetti Chapel within the church of Santa Trinita in Florence. In the painting, we see a nativity scene, but it's set against a backdrop of ancient Rome. In the center, the Virgin Mary kneels before the Christ child, who lies on the ground on a bundle of hay. To the right, a group of shepherds crowds in to see the infant. These shepherds are a direct homage to the northern influence I mentioned earlier. They're depicted with rugged, sun-beaten faces, thinning hair, and missing teeth. They look like real laborers of the day, providing a stark, grounding contrast to the serene, pale beauty of the Virgin Mary. The setting itself kind of tells a complicated story. Instead of a traditional wooden stable, the Holy Family is in the ruins of a classical Roman structure. The manger is actually an ancient Roman sarcophagus with a Latin inscription that references a prophecy about a new god appearing. Two fluted Corinthian columns rise up behind the group, one of them serving as a support for the roof. This use of ruins was meant to be symbolic. It represents the collapse of the old pagan era and shows the new law of Christianity being born. In the background, Ghirlandaio paints a winding procession of the Magi passing through a triumphal arch. And this arch is inscribed with the name of the Roman general Pompey the Great. By juxtaposing the arrival of Jesus with monuments of Rome, Ghirlandaio is appealing to the sophisticated humanist scholars of Florence. You might say it's sort of a suggestion that Christianity is the successor to the greatness of Rome. But I think probably the most charming detail is that Ghirlandaio included himself in the work. He painted himself as one of the shepherds. He's the figure gesturing toward the child, looking out at the viewer as if to say, "You see what I did here? I mean, this is pretty great, right?"
This concludes this week's episode of Who Arted, part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. If you found this tolerable, please leave a rating or review on your favorite podcast app. You can find images of the work being discussed this week and every week on social media at Who Arted Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, and of course on the website whoartedpodcast.com. Podcast done.